Before today's video starts, we just want to bring you a word from our sponsor, AppZone. If you like playing games on your phone or tablet, then you gotta check out AppZone, because you get paid just for trying new games. Then the longer you play a game, the more money you'll make. Rewards are paid out instantly through retailers like Amazon, Google Play, Xbox, Visa, Steam, and more. Personally, I love AppZone because I pay for my Audible subscription by just playing some awesome word and puzzle games. If you download AppZone by clicking on the link below the video, not only will you make money for just playing games, but you'll also be directly supporting Criminally Listed. AppZone is only available for Android, but below the video you'll find a link to a similar app for iOS. And now, without any further delay, here's today's video. Number 3. The Brickas. In 1966, the Bricka family, which consisted of 28-year-old Jerry, his 23-year-old wife, Linda, and their 4-year-old daughter, Debbie, lived on a quiet street on the west side of Cincinnati, Ohio. The family had moved from Seattle to Cincinnati 3 years earlier because Jerry worked as a chemical engineer for Monsanto and he had his job transferred. The family was well liked, and their neighbors considered them friendly. By all accounts, Jerry and Linda were both happy in their marriage. On Sunday, September 25th, 1966, the family attended a 10 o'clock church service, and then Jerry dropped off Linda and Debbie at home. He then went to work, which is something he commonly did on Sundays. At around 8 p.m., he drove home, and along the way, he stopped at a store and he picked up some milk. It had rained all day, but the rain had stopped earlier in the evening, and as a result, it was a cool night in Cincinnati. When Jerry got home, he took the garbage cans and set them on the curb because Monday was garbage day. On Monday evening, the family's garbage cans were still on the curbside. The neighbors thought that this was odd because Linda usually took the trash cans in shortly after the garbage was picked up. 24 hours went by, and the garbage cans still had not been collected. A neighbor also noticed that Monday and Tuesday's newspapers were sitting on the front porch. Two neighbors decided to go check on the family. One of the neighbors had served in World War II, and he immediately recognized the distinctive smell of death when he opened the door. In the master bedroom upstairs, they found the bodies of Jerry and Linda. They also found 4-year-old Debbie's body in her bedroom. All 3 family members had been stabbed to death. The police think that the murders happened on the Sunday night, not long after Jerry got home. The Brickas lived in a safe neighborhood, and most people didn't lock their doors. They think that the killer watched the family from their backyard, and then he let himself into their home through the back door, which was unlocked. What happened next is unclear, but both Jerry and Linda were tied up. Jerry had a sock shoved into his mouth, and a piece of tape may have been placed over his mouth as well. It's believed that the murder weapon was a carving knife that the killer found in the kitchen. Jerry had been stabbed 9 times on the left side of his back and in the neck. Linda had been stabbed 8 times on the right side of her chest. This seems to indicate that the killer was left-handed. Debbie, who was dressed in her pajamas, had been stabbed 4 times. All the stab wounds were quite deep. The stab wounds on the parents were 7 inches deep, and each stab went directly through Debbie's body. After the murders, it's possible that the killer spent several hours in the home cleaning up the crime scene. The police weren't sure what the motive for the triple murder was. None of the victims showed any signs of sexual assault. Jerry's wallet was missing, but besides that, not much else was missing from the family's home. The police investigated several possible motives, like the possibility that the murder stemmed from an affair that either Jerry or Linda were having. After all, the murders were overkill, so the killer may have had a personal relationship with at least one of the family members. However, the police never found evidence of an affair, and the couple didn't have any known enemies. One odd thing that the police couldn't understand is why did he tie up his victims first? If it was a crime of passion, why didn't the killer just start stabbing the family members after getting into the home? Also, how did one killer manage to hold a knife and tie up both Jerry and Linda? The police investigated the possibilities that the murders were a mafia hit or they were killed because of Jerry's work at Monsanto. But again, they found no evidence to back up either theory. In 2008, Melvin Ruger, who was the county prosecutor at the time of the murder, said that the police did narrow down their investigation to a single suspect. He said the police were never able to charge the man because they couldn't get a confession out of him. Ruger said that any time they tried to interview him, he brought his lawyer with him, and his lawyer wouldn't let him talk. The suspect has never been identified publicly, and he died in 2004. The police deny that they narrowed it down to a single suspect, but they did confirm that the man that Ruger was talking about is a suspect, and they have never been able to rule him out. Nevertheless, no suspects have ever been publicly named, and since the crime happened over 50 years ago, there is a good chance that the killer has, or will, go to his grave without ever facing justice for killing the Bricka family. Number 2. The Walkers. By December of 1959, 25-year-old Clifford and 23-year-old Christine Walker had been married for 5 years. They had 2 children, Jimmy, who was 3, and Debbie, who was just a month shy of her 2nd birthday. The family lived in a small, isolated house just outside of Osprey, Florida. Clifford earned a meager living as a ranch hand on someone else's farm. Christine did work around the house and cared for the children. December 19, 1959 was a Saturday, and the family was out doing some errands. They picked up some cattle feed, some groceries, a pack of Cool cigarettes, which is the only brand that Clifford smoked, and some penny candies for the kids. They also stopped by the home of some friends, Don and Lucy McLeod, for a visit. Both Clifford and Christine were driving their own vehicles, and Christine left the McLeod's home first. Clifford and the kids left the McLeod's home about 15 minutes later. The next morning, at about 5:30 a.m., Don McLeod knocked on the back door of the Walker home. He and Clifford had planned on going hunting for wild hogs. Don noticed 2 odd things when he pulled up to the family's home. The first was that the car that Christine was driving was not parked in its usual spot. Secondly, any other time that they went hunting in the early morning, Clifford was usually awake by the time that Don got to his house. That morning, the Walker's house was dark. Don knocked on the back door, but there was no answer. So he cut the screen on the door and unhooked the latch. He stepped through the doorway and into the kitchen. First, he saw Christine's body lying on the kitchen floor. Just beyond her body, lying on the floor in the living room, was her husband, Clifford. Curled up next to Clifford was 3-year-old Jimmy. They were all laying in pools of their own blood. Don ran out of the house, got into Cliff's Jeep, and drove to the nearest phone, which was a mile away. Members of the sheriff's department arrived shortly afterward, and they too were shocked by what they saw. The family had started decorating for Christmas, and there were a few presents under the tree. Based on evidence found at the crime scene and interviews with people who knew the family, the sheriff's department was able to put together a timeline of what happened that December afternoon. Christine arrived home at about 4:05, and since the car that she was driving wasn't in its usual spot, it's believed that the killer, or killers, were already at the house when she arrived home. Christine most likely invited the killer into the house. They think this because her purse was hung up and the groceries had been put away. Also, the Christmas card which Lucy McLeod had just given her was put on display on top of the refrigerator. Then the man attacked Christine, and she fought back, causing him to bleed. They ended up in Jimmy's room, where Christine was sexually assaulted on the floor. He then shot her twice in the head. After she was dead, her body was dragged out into the living room. Around 4:30, Clifford and the children arrived home. Clifford left a loaded rifle in his Jeep and led the children inside. After Clifford stepped through the front door of his home, a bullet entered the corner of his right eye. He fell backward, and he was dead by the time he hit the ground. He still had his cowboy hat on. Jimmy was shot in the head, and then there was evidence that he crawled towards his father's body. As he crawled, he was shot twice more in the head. Debbie was found face down in 4 inches of water in the bathtub. The killer had shot her once in the head, but the shot didn't kill her. It's believed that he ran out of bullets. So he started to fill the bathtub, and when the water was deep enough, he held the toddler's head under the water. The killer left several clues behind. This included a bloody boot print, a cigarette wrapper from a brand of cigarettes that Clifford didn't smoke, and a fingerprint on a tap. He also left the casings from .22 caliber bullets, but the police couldn't tell if they were fired from a rifle or a pistol. The sheriff's department nearly immediately ruled out robbery as the motive because the family didn't have much money and they had few possessions. However, several odd items were taken from the home. This included Clifford's pack of Cool cigarettes, his hunting knife, and Clifford and Christine's marriage certificate, which had been hung on the wall in a simple frame. The oddest thing that was stolen was Christine's majorette uniform, which she wore in high school. Christine was proud of her uniform, and she would often show it off to guests. She was hoping that when her daughter Debbie was old enough, she would wear it. The first suspect in the massacre was Don McLeod, who found the bodies. He was questioned and he was given a polygraph exam. He swore that he had nothing to do with the murders, and it was determined that he was telling the truth, so he was cleared as a suspect. Then, about 2 weeks after the murders, 2 possible suspects emerged, Perry Smith and Richard Hickok. On November 15, 1959, about a month and a half before the Walkers were killed, Smith and Hickok broke into a farmhouse owned by the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas. Smith and Hickok had been in prison, and another inmate told them that Herbert Clutter had a safe with lots of money in it inside of his home. However, after breaking into the home, Smith and Hickok learned that there was no safe, so they decided to kill the family. 48-year-old Herbert Clutter had his throat slashed, and he was shot. Then his wife, 45-year-old Bonnie, their 16-year-old daughter, Nancy, and their 15-year-old son, Kenyon, were all shot in the head. The murders of the Clutters and the ensuing trials of Smith and Hickok were the basis for Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, which is considered the first true crime book. Smith and Hickok were hanged on April 14, 1965, after spending 5 years on death row. People immediately saw the parallels between the murders of the Clutters and the murders of the Walkers. The sheriff's department saw the parallels as well, but they didn't think that Smith and Hickok killed the Walkers. Newspapers in Florida printed Smith and Hickok's photographs with a headline asking if anyone had seen them in the area when the Walkers were killed. But no one could confirm that they were even close to Florida at the time of the massacre. The sheriff's department was pretty sure that the killer was local and probably knew the family. It seemed like Christine was comfortable enough to let the killer inside her home while she was alone. Despite the sheriff's department's hesitation to name Smith and Hickok as the killers, many people, including family members of the victims, were sure that they were the killers. For over 50 years, that assumption went unchallenged. Then in 2012, the bodies of Smith and Hickok were exhumed so that the police could get DNA samples. Their DNA was compared to the DNA found on Christine's underwear. Neither men's DNA was a match, so Smith and Hickok were officially ruled out as suspects. The Sheriff's Department has had 582 suspects in the case, but no arrests were ever made. There has been speculation that Christine might have been having an affair and the murder stemmed from that, but there is no evidence to support that theory. Instead, the Sheriff's Department thinks that Christine knew her killer and she wasn't worried to have him in her home. After all, her husband would be coming along at any time. Inside the home, the killer, who may have been drinking, saw an opportunity to make a sexual advance on Christine without her husband there. She rejected him, and things turned violent, leading to the whole family being slaughtered. Sadly, it's been nearly 60 years since the entire Walker family was wiped out, and unless the Sheriff's Department catches an extraordinary stroke of luck, there is a good chance that it will never be solved. Number 1. Cassandra Rundle, Dietrich Stroom, and Melanie Stroom. Cassandra Rundle was born in October 1947 in Everettville, West Virginia. Shortly after graduating, Cassandra married her high school sweetheart, Steve Stroom. The newlyweds moved to Colorado, where Steve got a job as the director of personnel at a steel company, and Cassandra attended the University of Southern Colorado. In June 1972, Cassandra gave birth to the couple's first child, Dietrich. Dietrich was followed by his sister, Melanie, in 1974. Cassandra and Steve ended up divorcing, and Cassandra started dating a man named Douglas Peltzer. Peltzer was Cassandra's career advisor in university, and he also owned a tattoo parlor and a pool hall. Eventually, Cassandra married Peltzer, and she and her 2 children moved to Colorado Springs to live with him. Their marriage ultimately ended in divorce, but Cassandra and Peltzer remained friends. In the summer of 1984, Cassandra was single, and she was looking to meet a new man. In July, she took out a personal ad in a newspaper in Colorado Springs. It read, "Blonde, green eyes, 5 feet 2 inches, 95 pounds, seeking rugged individualist. I'm a free spirit, independent, well-educated, somewhat shy, sensitive, and enjoy life. I'm a one-man woman looking for one good man. Please send photo in short letter." She placed a similar ad a month later. In total, she received 85 responses to her 2 ads. According to her friends, she met 10 to 12 of these men for lunch dates. 6 months after the second personal ad was published, everything seemed to be going well for the family. Cassandra was 37 years old, and she worked as an administrative assistant for a developer in Colorado Springs. She was dating a man, and she was friends with her second husband, Douglas Peltzer. Dietrich was 12 years old, and Melanie was 10. Both were enrolled in classes for gifted students, and by all accounts, they were good kids. On February 12, 1985, Douglas Peltzer took Cassandra and her 2 children out to see the movie Witness. The next night, Peltzer took Cassandra out for dinner. On Valentine's Day, Peltzer drove over to Cassandra's house to drop off a gift for her. Once there, he let himself into the family's home. Minutes later, at 10:37, he called 911 and said that he needed the police. All the beds in the house were made, so it's believed that the family got up early that Valentine's Day. The police think that the attack probably happened between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. A neighbor thought that she saw Dietrich outside the family's home at around 7 a.m. He looked down the road and then went back inside. There were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. It is believed that the attack started in Cassandra's bedroom. She was found naked on her bed. She had been tied up with an extension cord and an electrical wire from a lamp. She had been struck 10 times in the head with a blunt object. She was then sexually assaulted. Finally, the killer strangled her to death with a pair of her own stockings. It's believed that the killer then made his way to Melanie's room. There was evidence, like overturned furniture, that shows that the 10-year-old tried to fight off her attacker. Just like her mother, she was beaten with a blunt object, bound, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Dietrich's body was found in his bedroom. He was the only family member who was dressed in their street clothes. The police don't think that Dietrich was in the house when the attack started, and he probably walked in on it. He had not been tied up, and he had not been sexually assaulted. But like his mother and sister, he had been beaten with a blunt object and then strangled to death. In his room, the police found a bloody hockey stick, which is most likely the blunt object used to beat the family. About an hour and a half after the bodies were found, Cassandra's boyfriend stopped by the family's home. He was worried because Cassandra hadn't shown up for work. The police interviewed him, and they quickly cleared him as a suspect. The police thought that since there were no signs of a break-in or forced entry, the killer may not have been a stranger to the family. So the next people the police investigated were Cassandra's ex-husbands. But they were both cleared as suspects as well. Douglas Peltzer, who found the bodies, had an alibi, and Steve Stroom, who was the father of the two children, was living in Ohio. The police then began to look at the 85 men who got in contact with Cassandra through her personal ad. Unfortunately, this search did not lead to a suspect. In total, the police had over 400 persons of interest, and then they dwindled the list of suspects down to just 6. Yet, no arrests were ever made. Cassandra's father, Richard Rundle, who was an attorney in West Virginia, paid for his own investigation, and he came up with one viable suspect. His suspect is a man named Philip Wilkinson. Just before the murders, Wilkinson, who was 17, moved to Colorado Springs, and he enlisted in the Army. He was stationed at Fort Carson, which is about 7 miles from the murder scene. 6.5 years after the murders, Wilkinson was stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. On the night of July 29, 1991, Wilkinson broke into an apartment in Fayetteville. Once inside, he murdered 38-year-old Judith Hudson, her 19-year-old daughter, Crystal, and her 11-year-old son, Larry. Wilkinson beat all 3 family members to death with a bowling pin. He also attempted to sexually assault both the mother and the daughter, but couldn't, so he violated them with a household object instead. After the massacre, Wilkinson went AWOL for 6 months and then turned himself in. He was sentenced to death, and he is currently sitting on death row in Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. The police in Colorado Springs did confirm that he was a person of interest, but they said that they had cleared him because he was apparently in Korea when Cassandra Rundle and her children were killed. Cassandra's father, Richard, said that he had evidence to the contrary. However, what that evidence is unknown, and if it does prove that Wilkinson was in Colorado Springs when the family was murdered, it has never been used to charge him with the murders. Richard Rundle passed away without someone ever being brought to justice for killing his daughter and grandchildren. The police say the case is still open, but the murders of Cassandra Rundle and her 2 children, Dietrich and Melanie, is hopelessly cold. Thanks for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. We recently held a draw, and these are the 5 winners of the criminally listed prize pack. We will get in touch with the winners via email shortly. Don't forget to go to criminallylisted.com where you can suggest cases